Jesus was the eternal Son of God, and he came into this body that was given him. The Catholics talk about the Mother of God. Well, isn't Jesus God? Yes. But you're not the Mother of God. He is eternal. God was around a long time before Mary came on the scene. She is the mother of the body that was prepared.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in this world. Welcome to this live stream with my guest, Andrew Griffin. So we're going to have a discussion on the passage in Hebrews chapter 1, specifically verses 10 to 12. And Andrew just had a debate with Anthony Rogers. And I believe Anthony is out in the West Coast. So, hello, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Hey, how you doing, Carlos?
Good. Thanks for taking the time to do this. So you just had a debate. You've done many debates now. How many?
I kind of lost count. Probably at least around 10 or so debates. That was my, I want to say that was my, at least my third debate with Anthony Rogers. My first debate when I first began theology, studying theology, was on the Gospel of John. And then most recently we debated Hebrews. And then right before that, we debated Colossians, all arguing his argument was that it presents Jesus as God. Obviously, I disagree with that. So
Right. So if you can tell us a little bit about your background, and were you brought up in a church, in a Christian home, or what is it?
Yeah, I was brought up in a Christian home. Well, I use that word loosely. I was brought up in what I would call a kind of a churchy home, in that we went to church every Sunday. often during the week as well. I grew up Oneness Pentecostal. And so, if you've ever been to a Oneness Pentecostal church, you know that it's just much more intense than kind of singing hymnals and things like that. I had a falling out, from Christ and went, explored the world, and then came back to Christ and met my wife, went to church, was saved in the sense that my chaotic life was brought back into the peace of Christ. And I basically just got interested in studying theology. I was in various forums on Facebook, talking to apologists, and became inspired by apologists like Ravi Zacharias, and really felt the need to defend my faith against initially against New Age believers and atheists. And I began to question the thing that really triggered me into questioning things is reading John and understanding that only the Logos became flesh. And so when I would research into what the Logos is, and you understand that the Logos is not an actual person, I think that's sort of the crux of all theological distinctions, right? Because it comes down to whether or not the Logos or wisdom is a person. If you're a Trinitarian, if the Logos is a person, Arianism, the Logos is an actual person. And then so really all wisdom is lost. And that sort of became my foundational key to understanding everything.
Right. So you go from oneness. Were you a oneness believer, or that's just what you were brought up as? Did you?
Yeah, in these churches, you're not really taught doctrines, right? You just sort of have this faith, and it's no one really can make sense of it or tries to make sense of it. It's just Jesus is God. That's that, and this sentimental, emotional idea that God became a man and he died for you, and that's the reason that your sins are forgiven, and that's it, right? I mean, just wait it out until you go to heaven one day. And that's sort of the whole thing.
Right. So let's get right to it. We'll go for maybe an hour or so, if that's okay.
Yeah, it sounds great.
So this is a rather massive subject, of course, and I think this passage in particular in Hebrews 1 is particularly troublesome for, as you know, both Trinitarians. Well, they would say it's not, but and it's also been troublesome for non-Trinitarians over the centuries now. As far as I know, there's a couple of views when it comes to non-Trinitarians. Some believe part of this anyway is not about the Son, and that's the part I want to ask you about and take your take on. And that's mainly, I believe, verses 10 to 12. But first, tell us how you see this as a whole, and just go into a little bit of what you said in your presentation, how you see it and why.
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's important to have a foundational understanding about what the Old Testament says about God and him creating the world. You bring up a lot in which I agree with Trinitarian scholar Murray Harris, in that when we read Yahweh in the Old Testament, or even God, unless the text is explicit that it refers to someone else, we should always have the Father in mind. And so even when we go all the way back to Genesis 1, in the beginning God created, we should never read in the beginning the Trinity created. It's one singular person. We should have the Father in mind. So in the beginning, we could read that in the beginning the Father created, and the Father said, "Let there be light." And this is echoed in 2 Corinthians 4, which speaks about the God who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," has caused the knowledge of the glory of God to shine in the face of Jesus Christ. And so, and then again, by the word of Yahweh, that should be read by the word of the Father, by the Spirit of the Father, by the wisdom of the Father. Through the Father's wisdom, all things were created. So we first have to have that foundational understanding. Then, even when we read here in Hebrews, there's at least 3 singular personal pronouns which point back to God. So if we say God spoke long ago, that's the Father spoke long ago. And when you say in these last days, he has spoken to us through a Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom he created. So even here, the author of Hebrews sees it as only one person who created the world. It's not. So the secondary issue is, how did God create the world? Through which means did God create the world? Which again, all throughout the Old Testament, it's through his word, it's through his wisdom. In Pauline literature, we see that it's through this mystery that he was hidden, which was Christ. And so this Christ is this mystery through which he created the world. And another interesting thing is sort of controversial, is how do we interpret that word world there in Hebrews 1:2? It's a plural form of the word ion, which refers to ages. It can refer to, and that's a great definition down there. That's exactly right. These temporal ages, it came to be used of the spatial world, which is essentially how things are interconnected. So putting all that together, it's how all of these ages or periods of time interconnect to point to Christ, who is the culmination and fulfillment of all of those things. In other words, Christ is that sort of ideal person, or who God had in mind when he created all of the different periods of history which form the world history of eternity, right? And so again, and so just to be short, and then again, it talks about the Son as the radiance of God's glory. This word is used in wisdom literature to describe wisdom. And so again, here, it's never an issue of whether God created all of the ages through Christ. It's a matter of how we understand that, right? Does that mean God was, holding Christ and having him create things, or did God delegate those responsibilities, which doesn't match the entire Old Testament, and so it creates all sort of contradictions? Or did God create, as you believe and I believe, that God created all things with the Son in mind as the person who would become heir of all things, because that's what he was predestined to be?
Right. Let me ask you a question about that word translated world. So are you saying that in verse 2, can the word ages include this physical world? I think in the debate, in his rebuttal, Anthony Rogers made a big point of that. And what happens, as you know, is that there are 2 questions, as you say. The question about that the Trinitarians want to have is twofold, it seems to me, Andrew. When it comes to Hebrews 1, is Jesus the God, the creator, Yahweh, right, the Lord, that establishes or founds the earth, which they see as Genesis, this physical world? And a separate question, it seems to us, whether the Son pre-exists. Well, obviously, if you have already a mindset where this passage is talking about the Son as the creator later on, but here, as you say, the writer has God as a singular personal individual being. I don't even know what, a person, a non-human person. So, but can the word ages refer to the physical world? Is that what you were saying in the debate? You were not saying it does not, or it does?
I think so. My opinion, I'm open to other opinions, but my understanding through much study of the word is that indeed it can refer to the physical creation. But two things. One, that's not the primary meaning of that's not the primary meaning of the word. And two, theologically, we could look at all creation. So it would be the physical universe, but within a certain context about what we're talking about here. For instance, the author here, I don't think has in mind that butterflies were created, or rivers or mountains or things like this. When we look at the created world, especially in Pauline literature, we see things like the stars, which govern the seasons of the different festivals and feasts, which all pointed towards Christ. Which Paul talks about these rudimentary elements, which all pointed towards Christ. So if the author is speaking at all about the physical universe, theologically, it has to be read within context.
Right, and the other thing I always ask is, so which is it? Is the Son being presented as the instrument, right? The agent of creation, or is the Son the creator? It seems like they, the old saying, you can't have your cake and eat it too, or something like that.
Yeah.
It seems like they're saying, okay, there's God, and he creates through the Son. Pre-existence, literal. Okay.
Yeah.
But then when you get further down in this chapter, and that's what I want to talk to you about in verses 10 to 12, then they turn around and say, oh, that's the Son creating Genesis. Well, you know what I mean? It's so confusing.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, they switch identities. They collapse identities. Like you said, it's at one point it's the Father creating through the Son, and at another point it's only the Son who's doing the creating. And then at the point where you kind of ask them, well, who was it that created? What does it mean? Does it mean that the Father sat on the sidelines while the Son actually did all the creating? They sort of glitch and shut down. And they come up with this excuse that, well, I don't need to make sense of it. It doesn't have to make sense. You're just kind of using your brain too much. But the reality is, it's contradictory to the entire Bible, and they really just have an axe to grind and to keep their presuppositional doctrines.
Right. So if the writer here establishes that God creates through the Son in some way, we're not going to deal with that, because I think that's just a separate matter, pre-existence, literal pre-existence. The issue here is of creator and agent or instrument of creation, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what I want to ask you about, because when we get down to verses 10 to 12, invariably, the Trinitarian would say, okay, this means the Son is Yahweh, the creator of Genesis and the creator of all things, right? And that's what Rogers pretty much his position in the debate, which has to be his position. So let me ask you this. So when we get down to verses 10 to 12, is that about the Son or is that about the Father? As you know, many non-Trinitarians, so-called biblical Unitarians or just Unitarians, many hold that this switches to the Father. How do you see it, and why do you think is one or the other?
Well, I think the case for it referring to the Son is twofold, and in very strong favor for referring to the Son. One, because the author says, but of the Son, he says, and the author has a rhetorical technique where he often uses a second verse to sort of reinforce his point in the first verse that he brings up. So that's the first thing, but that's not, to me, is not really strong enough. The reality is that when you go back to the Old Testament, particularly the Septuagint, from which the author is citing from, the language changes and says specifically that God responded to this person. So it says that God answered the suppliant. So this man is lamenting towards God. In the Hebrew text, it's generally understood, and all translations say that it's only this man, this lamenting man pouring out his heart to God. But in the Septuagint, explicitly, it tells us that God answers him back. And so following that, this is clearly how the author of Hebrews takes it, that God is answering somebody. If not, you have an interpretive problem when you go to the Septuagint, from which the author of Hebrews is clearly quoting, in that who is God speaking to?
Right. Let me bring up a translation here. This is Brenton's on Bible Hub, Septuagint translation, so people can see. So we're talking about verses 23 following. He answered him in the way of his strength. Tell me the fewness of my days. Take me not away in the midst of my days. Thy years are through all generations. In the beginning, thou or you, O Lord, did lay the foundation of the earth. The heavens are the works of thine hands, or your hands. So you're saying that the Septuagint here differs from the Hebrew Masoretic. Now, this is something Rogers said in the debate. I heard him said, I wrote it down. Let me post it because I thought it was interesting. He said that the Hebrew text reads exactly like the Greek. And then Rogers said, God is speaking to this figure, calling him Lord, meaning Yahweh, in the Hebrew and Greek text. Now, you immediately had a reaction to that. You said, I think you said, I've never heard that. Can you explain here what the fallacy is? Or, I mean, he's just factually wrong, I think.
Yeah, it's twofold. One, as you know, the Hebrew text doesn't say Lord. And well, it's kind of three things, I guess. One, the Hebrew text doesn't call the suppliant Lord. The Greek text uses the word Lord. Two, there, concerning that, being called Lord doesn't automatically make someone Yahweh. The name Yahweh is never used in either one of the texts. They argue that Kyrios always means Yahweh in some way. But going back to the the Hebrew text, essentially the whole root of the so if we go back to, I think, to verse 23. So as you know, the Masoretic text began to add these vowel points. But when we go to this word for he weakened, it's just the consonantal skeleton, essentially, of these letters for this word Anna can have one of two meanings. It can mean either that he afflicted me, or it can mean that he answered me. And ultimately, the context is going to determine what the meaning of the word is. And so Anthony what threw me off with Anthony is that, unlike most Trinitarian apologists, he actually argues that the Greek text, the Hebrew text, should also read "He answered me," and that God should be seen as answering the suppliant even in the Hebrew text. So the root issue there is that the consonantal skeleton without the vowel points added later on is this word Anna, which can refer either to again to affliction, or it can refer to someone answering another person. But from my understanding, it has the meaning of affliction in a context when there is lamenting going on, which is the entire context of the Hebrew Bible. I mean, of Psalm 102, right?
Right. So let me show people, because I had this slide. I'm not sure if this helps, but so yes, the as far as I can see, the Hebrew, uh, let's see, the Hebrew Masoretic there on the left, it's clearly a change. I mean, any as he said that he accused you, Anthony Rogers, of fumbling or not knowing the Hebrew or the Greek or whatever, but I think he's confused clearly, and anyone can check this. Don't believe us. Just it's a factual error, I think, to say that the Hebrew reads exactly the same as the Greek. And there on the left, you have the supplicant speaking about God, right? So he has weakened my strength in the way he has shortened my days. But the Greek has a different reading, as I think you're right. God speaking to someone else, he answered him in the way of his strength. And then here's the clincher, though, and this goes back to what Roger said in the debate, that the Hebrew matches the Greek exactly. In verse 25, if you see, actually, let me bring up the Hebrew here. So Anthony Rogers said that God is addressing someone else as Yahweh in Hebrew. But as you can see there, the interlinear, neither the word Yahweh, the divine name, or Elohim appears, or Adon even, just the generic Lord. So is that what you meant?
Yeah, he was sort of piling on points, and then at the point he said about, like you said, about the Hebrew text matching the Greek exactly, and it's like, well, you sort of have to take all of these points individually, uh, and sort of piling them on there. It's just to make a case. It's irresponsible, I think, and it's misleading because, as you said, there's actually significant changes from the Hebrew text to the Septuagint, and there's also significant changes from the from Septuagint to Hebrews as well. He adds a few different words and phrases to make his point in Hebrews as well.
Right. And you also brought up to explain how someone else other than God can be creator. So here, if this is the Son, you brought up a text in Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us about that, Isaiah 51:16?
Yeah, so in Isaiah 51:16, I have the PowerPoint uploaded if you want to.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. So this is your PowerPoint. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to go all the way to these texts.
Yeah, it's all yours. Just give us your prez.
Let's see. So, of course, we see you, Lord, in the lay the foundation. And here he's quoting from the Septuagint. We see that change. You, Lord, laid the foundation. And it says God is he's answering this person, telling them that the Lord laid the foundation. At first let's let's go to Isaiah 51. Here, God is speaking to somebody. I did watch a video you sent me on, I want to say, was it Jeremiah?
Jeremiah chapter 1, where similar language is used for the prophet. He is appointed to tear down and build up or establish the nations.
Yeah, that's a brilliant video, very insightful. And so we see here God speaking to somebody saying, I have put my words in your mouth. Again, here is a singular person because Yahweh is just one person all throughout the Old Testament. There's a handful of times where it's controversial, but again, we don't bend the ambiguous to and distort the clear text. We do the opposite. But here it's got one person speaking. He's saying, I've put my words in your mouth and covered you with the shadow of my hand, one person, in order to establish the heavens and to found the earth. Well, the thing is that the heavens and the earth have already been created. And so it's odd that God is saying to this person that this person is going to establish the heavens and to found the earth. And the means by which he does it is to put his words in this person's mouth. But the context, and here's where Rogers accused me of sort of ripping all of this stuff out of context when within the confines of a debate, I think I made the point that the context that interweaves all three of these texts, Isaiah 51, Psalm 102, and the book of Hebrews, is the restoration of Zion. And the author says, when we back up in the same chapter of Isaiah 51, for Yahweh will comfort Zion and will look with compassion on all her ruins. He will make her wilderness like Eden and her desert like the garden of Yahweh. And so here, God is clearly speaking about recreating the world, and he's going to do it through the agency of a prophet. A lot of people take this which goes back to it is a lot to talk about understanding creation, understanding new creation, understanding that creation in Genesis 1 was about the ordering of chaos. God uses this word, and if you could pull up Jeremiah 4:23 as well, is an important text to speak about here. So in Jeremiah 4:23 here, it says, I looked at the land. So here's Jeremiah, and it says, it's Jeremiah speaking. I looked at the land and saw, and that it was an empty wasteland. Actually, when we go into the Hebrew there, that word for empty wasteland is tohu and bohu, which is the only time, as far as I understand, is the only time when those two words exist together outside of Genesis 1:2. And as it says here, the words tohu va bohu allude to Genesis 1:2, hyperbolically picturing a reversal of creation and return to the original pre-creation chaos. And so from Genesis 1, the whole idea of creation is about God bringing order out of chaos. And of course, this is not to be taken literally here in Jeremiah. He's speaking about how God's judgment is coming on Israel, and this is what he's looking at. Yeah, and so back here, so here and again in Isaiah, that's demonstrating why we have to have a foundational understanding of creation in the first place. And one of the interesting things during the debate that happened is Anthony saying, look, even the people in the chat, I was speaking about order and chaos. And Anthony says, well, look, the people in the chat and myself, Anthony, we don't even know what you're talking about, which is, to me, is just, it's disturbing. Because literally, this is one of the meta-narrative points that is literally from Genesis to Revelation that we have to understand. In the beginning, in the very beginning, is about God bringing order from chaos. And literally in Revelation, the last part of Revelation, God is reordering things. There's creation imagery which talk about the seas. The seas were no more, which of course echoes Genesis language about God taming the seas. But throughout the Bible, this refers to the nations, saying that God is essentially going to bring peace to his people, and that the nations are not going to essentially bother people or be chaotic. God is going to bring everything into order. And so the fact that they don't understand that huge meta narrative point is very disturbing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
let me just briefly bring up, in connection to Isaiah 51, the Net Bible. You probably have seen this, but for the sake of the people online. So the New English Translation, not a Unitarian or non-Trinitarian group, they have interesting comments here. So I commission you as my spokesman. So this is God, Yahweh, speaking to someone, right? The servant. Now, this is part of the so-called suffering servant cycle, which began in 42, 43, something like that, and ends in 53, 54. And we know that originally it's applied to Israel. Israel is identified as the servant, I think back in chapter 42 and 43. So this is God talking to this servant, who in the Old Testament is the nation of Israel. And he says, I commission you as a spokesman. I cover you with the palm of my hand to establish the sky and to found the earth, to say to Zion, you are my people. So if you click there on that footnote 45, let me see. Says the infinitives in verses 16b are most naturally understood as indicating the purpose of the divine actions described in the first part of the verse. The relationship of the third infinitive to the commission is clear enough. So here's the point. The Lord has made the addressee, and they have a question mark, his special servant or his suffering servant, his spokesman, so that this servant might speak encouraging words to those in Zion. But how do the first two infinitives relate? The text seems to indicate that the Lord has commissioned the addressee, the servant, so that the latter, the servant, might create the universe. Now, I wouldn't go that far, but anyway, perhaps creation imagery is employed metaphorically, so that makes more sense. And I think that's what you were saying in the debate, to refer to the transformation that Jerusalem will experience. What do you make of that?
That's precisely it. One of the things I brought up in the debate, and I heard from this professor speaking about context, is that let's say you hear a movie quote and you've seen the movie before, that might bring up 100 different images in your mind. You may understand how it's culturally relevant, and you will understand maybe the joke, or you'll understand what this person is talking about. But if you've never seen the movie, somebody could say a movie line to you and it just go completely over your head. You'll never understand it. And the same thing applies with understanding the Bible, is that if we don't understand the culture in which these things were written, we're never going to grasp the significance of what they're saying. Scholars, unbiased scholars who are looking at history and studying history like this, see this. Obviously, this is seen in a figurative sense. It's not about the literal annihilation of the cosmos. It's just about the reordering of society and God bringing this essentially utopian Eden back to earth, which was lost through the fall of Adam.
Right. And can you once again go back to your slides and just show us again the difference there with the Hebrew and Greek? I think it's better if since you got your slides up, because again, Rogers in the debate was claiming that the Hebrew text reads exactly like the Greek. So if you want to go through those slides.
Yeah, so I don't have the actual Hebrew text, but you've brought it up already. But there's several changes here in the Hebrew Bible. It's he has broken my strength along the way. Now there's something interesting too. I don't know if you have access to the Targum Psalms. If
I would have to look.
Yeah,
So
if you just Google Targum Psalms, it'll come up. There's a link for it on targum.info. And if you go to Psalm 102, I think that's very important uh, for the conversation as well. But while you're doing that, um, yeah, just clearly in the text here, um, there's clearly a change. We see two changes here. One, it typically reads, every single translation of the Hebrew Bible says he has broken my strength along the way. In the Septuagint, it clearly reads he answered him. So it's all a matter of how we understand that. The second change we see is at the bottom, in the beginning you laid the foundation. This is the suppliant speaking to Yahweh, speaking about the original creation of the heavens and the earth, which God alone, one person, created. But in the second part, in the Septuagint, there's a change where it says, in the beginning, you, O Lord, did lay the foundation, after God is answering this person. And so the remainder of the chapter would refer to Christ reordering society, essentially.
right, and is this the website you?
No, it's gonna be let's see, it's gonna be targum.info right
Info?
there. Yep.
Okay.
And then
Yep. Let me go down. Oh,
let's
does
see.
it have all the songs? Psalm 10.
Well, there
Okay.
should be an index. If you go maybe back to just the home screen for that. Maybe just erase all of that in the search bar. Well, I don't know. I could share my screen. I have it up.
Yeah.
So that's okay. Let's
Hold
see.
on. Let's see if you can bring up yours.
That might actually work, what you have right there. There we go. So if we go down to verse 25, I thought this was absolutely fascinating, because essentially if we have this differing understandings, like for instance, if the word can refer to if the word Anna can refer either to he answered or afflicted, then we're going to have to gather some context about how this verse was originally understood by the Hebrews. That's the crux of the matter. The crux of the matter is, was it originally understood as only the suppliant referring reference, lamenting to Yahweh, and is there a change in the text where it could have been come to be understood as something different? So look at verse 25 there. Because this is the verses are a little bit different, I think. But if we see in verse 25 there, I was blown away when I found this after the debate. It says, I will say in the presence of my God. And so again, for the Hebrews here, if we have, so the Targums was essentially an Aramaic translation or interpretation of what the Hebrew Bible meant for people who, when the Hebrew language began to not be spoken so much. And so it's a good place to look, not necessarily definitive, but it's a good place to look to get into the mind of these people. It says in verse 25, I will say in the presence of my God. And so here you sort of have you have this word ana, which can refer to answering something, but here it's even the suppliant saying something to God. And what he says is, do not remove me from the world at the half point of my days. So this is clearly, again, only the man speaking to God. He says this, and listen to this, bring me to the world to come. Of course, where do we read this? Explicitly in Hebrews 25, which the author of Hebrews says is really the whole subject about what we're speaking about throughout this entire epistle.
Sorry, you mean Hebrews 2:5?
Hebrews 2:5, yeah.
Verse 5.
Yeah, exactly. And so here in the Targums, it's this man, again, speaking to God, asking him, don't remove me from the world, because he's expecting the world that is to come, which is a major theme throughout the whole book of Hebrews. And so I think this is great insight into how the Hebrews originally understood the psalm. They did not understand it as God speaking back to the suppliant. Rather, it was only the suppliant lamenting towards God. But clearly and undisputably, we see here in this text, in Psalm 102 in the Septuagint, this word, I'm not even going to try to say it because I'm not that good at Greek, but the word always refers to a response from one person to another within a conversation. And again, in the Latin Vulgate, they translate this as responded, just like our English language responded. So God is responding. This word cannot, in the Greek, cannot mean anything other than a response within a conversation, from my understanding. Unlike the Hebrew, which can have the meaning either afflicted or responded, the Greek word here always refers to a response from one person to another.
Right. Do you want to go through the rest of the slides in reference to the
let's see,
especially that second Lord, that Kyrie, that I think.
I don't have I don't really have any other ones
Oh, okay.
Other than that. I just tried to bring up some context.
Sure.
About because I was accused of trying to take Isaiah 51 and sort of just ripping these verses out of context. But we'll go back to Psalm 102. I made sure that I wasn't doing that, because we see when we scroll up in the psalm, number one, it's a prayer of one who is afflicted and pours out his lament before Yahweh. Yahweh's just one person there, but he's speaking to Yahweh, and he says he will rise up and have compassion on Zion, for it is time. So here he's speaking about this time. And then he talks about the appointed time has come, for Yahweh will rebuild Zion. And then when we go and get some context for what the Bible is speaking about concerning Isaiah 51, Yahweh will comfort Zion. So we see this, which is essentially just a way of speaking about Jerusalem. And in the author of Hebrews, of course, he contrasts this with Mount Sinai. So there's Mount Zion, where the new covenant is established, and then contrasted with Mount Sinai, where the old covenant is established. Again, in Isaiah 51, my righteousness draws near. Here there's an anticipation and an expectation. The same thing we see in the Targum Psalm, where he's asking God, please do not take me away in the midst of my days. Imagine us being alive today and the times we live in, especially, and we're anticipating, we'll almost say, God, I want to be here when your kingdom comes. I please don't take me away in the midst of my days, speaking about all the affliction. But back to the context, he says, lift up your eyes to the heavens and look to the earth below, for the heavens will vanish, they will wear out like a garment. This is very similar language, not only to what the psalmist says, but also the addition to the text by the author of Hebrews, which is speaking about things folding like a cloak, which is essentially just a garment. But here it would be strange the question is, well, why? If why is the heavens and earth going to be created in the future, but God's saying here that he's going to destroy the heavens and the earth? Obviously, God is speaking about the old order of things, and speaking about the recreation of things in the new way, which to me would be the old created order, and especially the old covenant established through Moses, in contrast with Jesus laying the foundation for the new covenant and the new heavens and the new earth.
Cool. So, okay, so there's some confusion here about, so the creation in view here is future. It's the new creation, the establishment by the Son of establishing or founding Zion, the Zion of the age to come, the world to come, of which we are speaking. If we go to that Hebrews 2:5, is that right?
Yes.
So is that like, are you a millennialist, by the way? Do you believe in a literal millennium first?
Honestly, I've never looked into that topic. So what's your thoughts there?
Well, my question is, so some people will ask, I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Sure,
but
yeah.
the question is, if this is about the new creation in terms of the founding of Zion, the restoration of Zion, right? How is it that it will be, as you said, it will perish, as the scripture says? So that itself will perish, will be done away with. So how would you explain that?
Yeah, and that's the same issue that we see in Psalm 51. I mean, Isaiah 51, excuse me. Because here God's saying that the old created order is going to vanish. I think what textually it gets mixed up, because it appears as if in Hebrews it's saying what the Son created will be destroyed, and that's not correct. What the Son had what the Son has created is it's I don't think I see it that the Son has not fully created the heavens and the earth. The Son has laid the foundation for the new created order of things through his death and resurrection, and the establishment of the new covenant. Even when we see the God laying the foundations of the earth, does not mean that all of created history had played out at that point. He had merely laid the foundations. This is the beginning of something. And so I see it that Christ has laid the foundation, and I think that when we go into we see that Greek word there for foundation, he's laid the groundwork. And essentially this is the same thing when we look at building a house, that the same word in English, that foundation is that which you build upon. The foundation is not the complete thing. The foundation is not the whole house. That firm, solid foundation is that which we build upon. So Christ has laid the foundation for the new creation, but the new heavens and the earth have not come yet. And we read that in Revelation. We read that in Hebrews, that we're looking forward to something, but yet Christ has essentially inaugurated the new heavens and earth through his death and resurrection and the establishment of the new covenant. The old order of things are going to pass away. And so we see that same dynamic here in Isaiah 51, where the old heavens and the earth are going to pass away, but yet the new heavens and earth are going to be established through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the establishment of the new heavens. God has laid the foundations for the new heavens and the earth. The foundations being that which is built upon.
Right. Yeah, the way I have also perhaps seen this as a millennialist myself, right? So I believe in a literal millennium, the first stage of the what I call the first stage of the eternal kingdom. If this is about that, right? Well, we know that the millennium has a beginning and an end. And for that, you read Revelation 20, right? Which clearly says that at the end of the millennium, Satan, who has been bound, will be released, right? So Revelation 27, 20 verse 7, I should say. So that ends. So that's how I would fit this, the perishing or the, I think you said it well, it's not an annihilation. God is not going to completely annihilate the world and then redo another world.
Yeah.
The Bible, let me show you the PowerPoint I have used in my thing. So I see like changes with this physical world. So before the flood, the Genesis world, and then after the flood, 2 Peter, Revelation 6 talk about a new world. And there's another change coming. Sorry, you can't see this, but that's Revelation 20. So you have the original creation, 2 Peter 3. The wicked forget that God made the heavens by the word of his command, brought the earth out from the water, surrounded it with water, through which the world of that time perished in the flood. Well, obviously, perishing doesn't mean as we understand it today. And then 2 Peter 3, the present creation by God's word, present heaven and earth, reserved for fire. On that day, heaven will pass away with a roaring sound. Everything that makes up the, quote, universe will burn and be destroyed. The earth and everything that people have done on it will be exposed, laid bare. Some have a translation that I think is not well to the context. And then the millennium, right? When the 1,000 years are completed, Satan destroyed, God will come down in his throne, from whose presence earth and heaven will flee. Well, that's interesting. Which earth and heaven? Well, if you're a millennialist and you see Revelation 20 as the new, creation. So I'm not sure if I hope that's clear.
No, it's very clear, and that's very fascinating. I've never really considered those 2 Peter verses. I think the way that to put it all together for me, as I'm just thinking, is that until the new heavens and the new earth are just absolutely complete, so there's still a creation process. Nonetheless, Christ has laid the foundation. He is that foundation on which everything will be built on, and he's made that atonement by the blood of his cross. We read all throughout the Bible, the New Testament. And so I think the way to see that is that, Satan and his rule would essentially be part of the old world, the old age of things, you could say. For instance, we see in 2 Corinthians 4 that Satan is called the god of this age. He's called the god of this world. And so essentially all of the created world will essentially come to an end, but nonetheless, I only see it as Christ. I think it comes down to whether or not you see it as Christ created the heavens and the earth, and that the heavens and the new heavens and the earth are already complete right now as we speak. I don't think that's the case. I think that later on we'll see the age that is to come, a future event on which the heavens and the earth will be recreated, or essentially just restored back to its original state of cosmic harmony, and sort of the utopian image we get in the end of Revelation.
Yeah, I think let's just call it change. Changes with creation. There's a couple of questions here, if you don't mind. Let me bring up.
Yeah.
So Hebrews 2:5, I think it's important. He did not put the world to come, about which we are speaking. We tend to forget, Andrew, that the chapter breaks and the verses are not inspired. So if you take out the chapter break between chapters 1 and 2 of Hebrews and just read it contextually, I think it might help. There's a question about verse 7. Who is the creator in verse 7, which matches the creator in Hebrews 1:10? So you made him lower than the angels for a little while. You crowned him with glory and honor. Which is the creator.
I guess, yeah. Well, I think this is the same confusion that Trinitarians run into, is they're not distinguishing between the original Genesis creation and the new creation, which is so heavily entrenched in Judaism prior to the New Testament and all throughout the New Testament as well. It's literally one of the biggest themes that we see in the New Testament, intertestament literature. So we cannot confuse the original Genesis creation with the new heavens and the new earth, which has already been demonstrated throughout this presentation, this conversation, that the new heavens and the new earth will come, and Jesus is seen as that person who it puts a face to this mysterious person in Isaiah 51, and Jesus puts a face to that as the creator of the new heavens and the new earth. And so the assumption, I think, here is that Hebrews 2:7 matches Hebrews 1:10, and that's an assumption that is just incorrect.
And one more question here. Did Jesus create? If so, what did Jesus create and when? Question for both. So you can go first.
Yeah. Well, again, so we just talked about that, and it's a great question, and that's a great question. These are the type of questions that we want to ask ourselves, and we don't want to stop until we find answers, because they're really important. So the way that I read it is that Jesus has laid the foundation. And again, even in the Psalms, before Christ came, the Bible says the heavens are the work of your hand, speaking to a future event. At that time, when the psalmist is writing, God is not speaking to that person at that time, saying that the new heavens and the earth have already been established either. So it's speaking about a future time when things will be created. But again, in the text of Hebrews, it says that you have laid the foundation. So he has essentially set the framework on which all of the other things will come, just like the foundation of a house. The foundation is not the house. The foundation is that which is built upon. And the new creation, which is the new restored order of things, has come through as a result of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the establishment of the new covenant.
Yeah, and I'll answer that question, Freddie, with a video at the end. If you can stay tuned, the video I sent you, Andrew. We'll wrap it up now. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you have to work and stuff. Did you want to go through any other slides here or any last words?
No, I think here we see again in Isaiah Isaiah 65, 66, he's speaking about, behold, I create the new heavens and the new earth, for as the new heavens and the new earth that I make shall remain before me. Again in 2 Peter 3:13, according to God's promise, we are awaiting the new heavens and the new earth. And so this idea that the new heavens and the earth have been already completed, I think almost contradicts 2 Peter 3:13, where at that same time they're still awaiting the heavens and the earth. It was not created immediately. I don't think it was created 50 years after the death and life and death of resurrection of Jesus Christ. But again, here, the main point to understand, I think, to grasp for everyone, is to sort of step out of this literal mindset so much and understand the big meta narrative of the Bible. there was in the beginning, there was chaos. Tohu va bohu. We saw that again in Jeremiah 4:23. Means a desolate wasteland. Only in the Septuagint does it later refer to invisible and unconstructed, which is a whole different topic. But in the Hebrew, tohu va bohu, which it means a desolate wasteland. God brought order to things. He began to say, well, the stars are going to go over here. The birds are I'm going to fill the skies with all the birds. I'm going to separate the land and the water. He's bringing order to this desolate wasteland. He fills the ocean with all the fish. He makes the grass and makes the animals. The pinnacle of what he makes is mankind in order to rule on his behalf as an image bearer. And even going back to new creation, Adam is presented in this garden temple as a high priest and also a kingly figure as the image of God. And what do we read in Revelation? He has made us a kingdom of priests to his God and Father. And essentially the whole earth, when it depends on your eschatological views, but the big point, the meta-narrative point that we want to grasp is that God brought order out of chaos. Then through Adam, chaos was introduced back into the world. Through Christ, there is a reversal and God begins to reorder the cosmos. This is the promise. This is the word of God that we have, that will be done one day. And so the whole thing about the new heavens and the new earth is about a reordering of society. These are the things that we need to focus on.
Great. Well, thanks, Andrew. Thanks for your time. It's a really difficult topic. I'm glad someone else has gotten a grasp of it. I don't expect people to agree with us at first. We always call Hebrews 1, specifically verses 10 to 12, probably the most difficult verses for our non-Trinitarian position. I think there's a lot to deal with there, with questions regarding pre-existence, which is a separate matter, and whether Jesus, the Son, is the actual creator of Genesis, which I think all of us non-Trinitarians do not agree with. So thanks a lot, Andrew. I'll let you go.
Thank you for having me. God bless you.
Good job. All right. And Freddie, for your question, I have a video. Not sure if you've seen this, but this is the one I sent to Andrew, and I'll end the live stream with this video. So thanks for watching. Something interesting about Jeremiah, the so-called weeping prophet, is that he's a type of the Messiah. So on the left there, you have a summary of Jeremiah's calling. So it says how God appointed him as a prophet to Israel and the nations to uproot and tear down the judgment, the bad time, and then to plant and build up the good times coming, the hope. The Lord stretched out his hand, touched my mouth. The Lord said to me, behold, I have put my words in your mouth. See, I have appointed you this day over the nations and over the kingdoms to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant. You will notice there are a few similarities with the Messiah, Jesus. Verse 9, I have put my words in your mouth. You can look at Deuteronomy 18. Moses talks about the prophet chosen from among Israel, and God will put his words in his mouth, like he did, of course, with Moses himself. And then you see the building up there to plant and so forth. Interesting comment from a book called The Prophecy of Isaiah. The phrase to plant is well established as a metaphor to begin anew or to set firmly in place. The servant is the point of origin of a new cosmic reality embracing heaven and earth. Jeremiah 1 verses 9 following was gifted with the Lord's word to plant kingdoms, but the servant will plant heavens, doing the creatorial work which the Bible reserves for God himself. So this has a lot of power, obviously, that God has invested him with. And the so-called suffering servant of Isaiah there on the right, and that's an image with some of the text throughout the so-called suffering servant cycle that begins really in Isaiah chapter 42 and ends in 54. Isaiah 51:16. Some translations rendered the Hebrew this way: I have put my words in your mouth. You see there the similarities. And have covered you with the shadow of my hand to establish the heavens, to plant, to build the earth, and to say to Zion, Jerusalem, you are my people. Also see Isaiah 49. So you see the similarities there with this so-called suffering servant, the so-called weeping prophet, Jeremiah. They both have the words of Yahweh, of God, the Father. They are the spokesman of God. That is what the word prophet means in the Bible. That's how the Bible defines that role or office. And they're invested with creatorial power, the power to plant, to build, to establish even the heavens and earth. And of course, in reference to the messianic future figure who turns out to be Jesus, we will see how that will actually extend to the actual physical earth. Another commentary, the Word Biblical Commentary on that verse, says that it makes no sense if the verse refers to the original Genesis creation. In the other instances, God acts alone, using no agent. Here, the one he has hidden in the shadow of his hand is his agent. And it goes on to say, heavens and land here refers metaphorically to the totality of order in Palestine. Heaven means the broader overarching structure of the empire, while the word land is the political order in Palestine itself. So although it may sound like Isaiah 51:16 is a reference to the original Genesis creation, the point is that it's looking forward. By the way, a similar comparison can be made with Psalm 102, speaks of a future people, future generations, not looking back to Genesis. Smith, in his Isaiah commentary, the reference must be to the new heaven and earth, like Isaiah 65, the Messianic age when spiritual Zion becomes the center of the divine program. God's word established the original creation. The servant's word will usher in the new creation. God's people inhabit the new heavens and earth, the new world created by the servant. So then we have a, I think, better understanding now of one of the most difficult New Testament verses for people who do not believe Jesus is somehow God, especially the creator of all things, Genesis. So we read in Hebrews 1 using Anthony's translation paraphrase, but of the Son, he says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of uprightness is the scepter of your kingdom. You have loved uprightness and hated iniquity. Therefore, God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness above your fellows. So this is the famous Psalm 45 reference, where this human Davidic figure, who turns out to be Jesus, is given the honorific title of God, as Jesus himself called the judges of Israel, by the way, gods. The Gospel of John chapter 10. You will note, obviously, that this little g God, which is the proper translation there, we believe, of Hebrews 1:8, that's because he has a God in verse 9. If you translate that capital G word in verse 8, you have a huge problem. And then here's the important point. And then again, this is about the Son, as we saw in verse 8. It has not changed. The addressee is the same. And you, Lord, that is the Son, in the beginning laid, remember those words? To plant, to build. So now the Lord Son here lays the foundation of the earth, and the heavens are the works of your hands. I hope you can appreciate here the parallels between the human Son, Messiah, Jesus, and the so-called weeping prophet, the suffering servant. They have been invested, if you will, empowered as the supreme agents of the one God of Israel, the Father, to even plant, build, found the nations and the earth itself here in the case of Jesus. And we must remember this, and this is quite a quote from a famous scholar called Brunner in his book Dogmatics. It's quite a statement. God alone is the creator. The Son is called simply and solely the mediator of the creation. In the New Testament, the Son, or Jesus Christ, is never called the creator. The Psalm quotation used in Hebrews 1:10 should not, again, not be used as an argument against the explicit doctrine of verse 2 in that chapter, where it says God through the Son, through whom he made the ages. In other words, everything that is. So through the Son, these things come to be. So that's quite a statement from Brunner, who was not obviously a non-Trinitarian, but he's just making a factual claim here regarding the biblical view of the one true creator, capital C, let's call him, and the difference with that and the builders that he, the God the Father, designates for his restoration, his great rebuilding of the world and the nations.